To my family, I am a culinary ghost. I am the 31-year-old daughter who wasted a prestigious English degree to run a silly little food blog. I am the one they talk about with a sigh, the one whose life choices are a source of quiet cocktail party embarrassment. They picture me in my small apartment kitchen taking blurry photos of homemade muffins for a handful of online followers. They see my life as a charming, if slightly pathetic, hobby. But to every top chef in this country, from New York to San Francisco, I am a name whispered with a mixture of terror and hope. They don't know my face, but they know my power. In the world that truly matters to them, I am not a ghost. I am a god. They know me only as the Oracle. My anonymous reviews posted on a website that gets millions of unique views a month can secure a restaurant's future with a waiting list stretching for years, or force its closure in a matter of weeks. My palate is my power, and my words are my weapon. And my family has absolutely no idea. My older brother Mark is the family's golden child. He is everything they understand and admire. He is a chef, yes, but a chef in the way they approve of one who trained under Michelin-starred tyrants in Europe, one whose ambition is as sharp and polished as his Japanese knives. He just opened Aura, a hyper-expensive tasting menu-only restaurant downtown. It's a temple of foam tweezers and theatrical smoke designed not just to serve food, but to acquire stars and accolades. His success is tangible, loud, and most importantly, expensive, all qualities my parents equate with value. This dynamic, of course, is not new. I remember the dinner party my parents threw to celebrate his acceptance into a prestigious apprenticeship in Lyon 2 years ago. Wanting to contribute, I spent 2 full days painstakingly recreating a classic, technically demanding Julia Child recipe, a duck à l'orange that required a dozen complex steps. I was immensely proud of it. The skin was perfectly crisp, the sauce a delicate shining balance of sweet and tart. That night, as our family and their friends ate the meal I had prepared, the conversation was exclusively about Mark. They toasted his real ambition, his commitment to a serious career, his bright future. My mother, taking a bite of the duck, turned to me and smiled. "Oh, this is a lovely little dish, Clara," she said, her tone the one you'd use for a child's macaroni necklace. "It's so nice that you have a cute hobby to keep you busy while you figure things out." My father nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Your brother is building a real career. That's what matters." I sat there, my creation being consumed as a pleasant but ultimately insignificant backdrop to my brother's real important life. They had no idea that while they were praising his future, I was already one of the most influential voices in his chosen industry. They saw him as an empire builder and me as a girl playing with recipes in her small kitchen. They had no idea that the fate of my brother's entire empire would soon depend on the opinion of their disappointing daughter with the silly little food blog. Aura opened to a storm of local media attention. It was the most anticipated restaurant opening of the year, a place of hushed tones, minimalist decor, and a 20-course tasting menu that cost more than my monthly rent. Mark was instantly the new star of the city's culinary scene. My parents were ecstatic, name-dropping the restaurant to anyone who would listen. I read the early fawning articles from local magazines, a familiar mix of pride and invisibility churning in my stomach. The phone call from my mother came a week after the opening. Her voice was brisk, logistical, the tone she used when organizing a family event she considered a mandatory obligation. "Clara, darling, we are all going to Aura on Saturday night to support your brother. I've booked the family table for 8. 8 p.m. Don't be late." It wasn't a question or an invitation. It was a directive. "Okay, Mom. I'll be there," I said already, picturing the evening of forced smiles and subtle digs. "And please," she added, her voice dropping slightly, "wear something nice. The black dress, perhaps. It's a very upscale establishment. Mark is trying to build a certain reputation, and it's important we all look the part." The implication was clear my usual self was not up to standard. My presence required management. Then her tone shifted again, becoming laced with a nervous energy I recognized all too well. It was the sound of my mother worrying about social standing. "The most important thing, Clara, is that we all make a good impression. The restaurant is getting great buzz, but Mark is absolutely desperate for a review from The Oracle. Have you heard of them? Apparently they're the only critic that matters anymore. A good review from them, and he's set for life." I had to press the phone against my shoulder to stifle a laugh. I took a sharp, quiet breath. my heart doing a little flip-flop of pure, unadulterated irony. Oh, really? I managed my voice miraculously even. I've heard the name. Heard the name Clara. Everyone in the food world is obsessed, she said, completely oblivious. Mark says getting that review is more important than getting a Michelin star right now. It can make or break a place like his. We just have to hope the Oracle decides to come in and that the service is absolutely perfect when they do. It could be anyone at any time. The absurdity of it was breathtaking. My mother lecturing me on the importance of my own anonymous verdict. She was praying for the attention of the very person she was currently instructing on proper attire. Well, I'm sure everything will be perfect, Mum, I said. I have to go. Talk to you Saturday. I hung up the phone and stared out my apartment window, a slow smile spreading across my face. My attendance at this dinner was no longer just a dreaded family duty. It had become something far more interesting. The most powerful critic in the country was indeed coming to Aura on Saturday night. But she wouldn't need a reservation. Of course. Here is part 3 of the story, continuing with Clara's preparation for the dinner. For a full day, I considered not going. I could feign a sudden illness, a classic move from my college days when I wanted to avoid a particularly dreaded family function. The situation felt too personal, too volatile. How could I possibly be objective? How could I separate Clara, the sister, from the oracle, the critic? The thought of sitting at that table under the weight of their judgment while secretly holding the power to validate or veto their entire life's ambition made my stomach churn. I called Ben, my sharp-witted, fiercely loyal assistant, and the only other person on the planet who knew my secret identity. I laid out the whole absurd scenario for him. He was silent on the other end of the line for a long moment, and then he let out a low whistle. "Wow," he said. "So, let me get this straight. Your brother, the one who thinks you just take pretty pictures of your lunch, is currently on his knees praying that you show up to his restaurant." He paused. "This is deeply ironic. It's like Shakespeare if Shakespeare wrote about Michelin stars and dysfunctional families." "It's a nightmare, Ben," I said. "Maybe I shouldn't go. It feels like a conflict of interest." "A conflict of interest," he replied. "Clara, this is the ultimate test of your integrity. You've reviewed restaurants owned by friends, by people you admire, by chefs you can't stand. You've always been objective. This is no different. You're not reviewing your brother. You are the oracle reviewing Aura, the most anticipated opening of the year. You have a professional obligation to be there." He was right. Avoiding it would be a disservice to my readers and a betrayal of my own professional code. I had to go, but I wouldn't go as the daughter seeking approval or the sister hoping for a truce. I would go as the oracle on an undercover assignment. The night of the dinner, I prepared for my role. I stood in front of my closet, bypassing the designer dresses and statement pieces I often wore to high-profile events. I wasn't dressing to impress. I was dressing to disappear. I chose a simple, elegant, but unremarkable outfit. A charcoal grey cashmere sweater, tailored black trousers, and flat leather shoes. I pulled my hair back into a simple low ponytail and wore almost no makeup. I was not dressing as the oracle who commanded respect through an aura of mystery and power. I was dressing as Maya, the quiet, disappointing daughter, with the silly little food blog. It was the perfect disguise. No one would ever suspect a thing. Before I left my apartment, I stood in front of the mirror and took a deep breath. I reminded myself of the principles that had made me successful. The food is the only thing that matters. The service must be invisible and flawless. A restaurant must have a soul. Ambition is not an accomplishment. It is a promise that must be kept on the plate. Tonight, my family would be a part of the decor. My history would be a footnote. The only thing I was there to judge was the restaurant itself. I left Clara, the sister, in the apartment with all her hurt and her complicated history. The woman who walked out the door was the oracle on her way to the most difficult review of her career, of course. Here is part 4 of the story, covering the dinner at Aura. Aura was exactly what I expected it to be, breathtakingly beautiful and completely devoid of a soul. The dining room was a study in minimalist luxury concrete floors, dark wood tables spaced impossibly far apart, and a single dramatic floral arrangement in the center of the room. The lighting was so artfully dim, it was almost impossible to read the menu. It wasn't a warm space. It was a stage designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. The hostess, a tall woman with a severe haircut, looked my simple outfit up and down before leading me to the family's table with a painfully polite smile. My parents were already seated, sipping champagne. Clara. Darling, you made it, my mother said, her eyes doing a quick, critical scan of my cashmere sweater. We were starting to worry. My father gave me a distracted nod before returning to his conversation with my brother's new girlfriend. I was an afterthought, a box that had been ticked on their family attendance checklist. A few minutes later, Mark himself made an entrance from the kitchen. He was in his pristine white chef's jacket, his posture radiating an arrogant sort of triumph. He looked less like a chef and more like a conquering hero returning from a victorious battle. My parents immediately began fawning over him. "It's just magnificent, son," my father boomed. "A triumph we are so, so proud." Mark soaked in their praise before finally turning his attention to me. He gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder. "So, Clara, what do you think?" he asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "Getting some good pictures for your little blog?" I gave him a small, tight smile. "It's very clean, Mark." Before he could decipher the insult hidden in the compliment, he was pulled away by another well-wisher. The conversation for the first half of the meal was exactly as I'd predicted. It was a monologue dedicated to Mark's genius, but underneath the praise I could sense a current of deep anxiety, and I knew exactly what it was about. "The only thing missing now is a review from the Oracle," my father said, leaning forward as if sharing a state secret. "Have you heard anything, Mark? Any whispers about them coming in?" Mark shook his head, a flicker of genuine worry crossing his face before being replaced by his usual bravado. "Not yet. They are notoriously anonymous. Could be anyone anytime. I've instructed the entire staff, every busboy, every server, to treat every single diner as if they could be the Oracle. The service has to be flawless. Well, I just hope they come on a good night." My mother added, her brow furrowed. "The fate of this entire venture could depend on it. One good review from the Oracle is worth more than a Michelin star these days." I sat there sipping my water, my face a carefully constructed mask of neutral interest. I listened to them strategize about how to impress me. I listened to my father suggest that Mark should personally greet any single diner, just in case. I listened to my mother fret about whether the lighting was flattering enough. The irony was so thick, so delicious, I could almost taste it. The first course arrived. It was a single perfectly seared scallop sitting in a pool of yuzu foam decorated with microgreens, placed with tweezers. I took a bite. It was technically perfect. The scallop was cooked to the precise second. The foam was light. The herbs were fresh. But it was also completely soulless. It was a dish cooked by an ambitious mind, not a passionate heart. It was a dish designed to impress, not to nourish. As my family continued to chatter anxiously about the anonymous critic who held their son's fate in their hands, I quietly made my first mental note. My work had begun, of course. Here is part 5 of the story covering the climactic dinner table scene. The meal progressed like a piece of theatre. Course after course arrived, each a marvel of technical precision. There was a deconstructed bouillabaisse that was a masterpiece of textures but had none of the rustic soul of the original dish. There was a slice of duck breast with perfectly rendered crispy skin, but it was served with a cherry reduction so aggressive it completely overpowered the delicate flavor of the meat. With each bite, my mental review grew sharper and more damning. It was the work of a chef, desperate to prove his intelligence, a chef who had forgotten that the purpose of food is to nourish, not just to impress. After the main courses were cleared, my father stood tapping his wineglass with a spoon. The already quiet room fell completely silent. He beamed, his face glowing with pride and expensive wine. "I'd like to propose a toast," he began, his voice full of emotion. "To my son, Mark, a man who understands that true success isn't a hobby, it's a conquest. He has dedicated his life to the pursuit of excellence, to achieving something truly world-class. And tonight we are all blessed to be sitting here in the magnificent result of that dedication. To Aura, and to the brilliant chef who built it, a round of enthusiastic hear and applause followed. Mark inclined his head graciously, soaking in the adoration. My father remained standing. Of course, he continued, his gaze now shifting down the table to land on me. Success comes in many forms. His tone softened into one of a patronizing, kindly patriarch. And we are so proud that Clara has also found a passion she enjoys so much. It's so important to have a little something to keep you busy, to bring joy into your life. The insult was so elegantly delivered that only I could feel its full sting. My life's work, my entire career reduced to a little something to keep me busy. The other guests smiled at me, a polite, pitying sort of smile. Before I could even formulate a response, Mark stood up, raising his own glass with a theatrical flourish. "I'd like to add to that," he said, a smug smirk playing on his lips. He looked directly at me, his eyes gleaming with a victory I hadn't even known we were fighting. "To my success, built on years of hard work, sacrifice, and real-world ambition." He paused, letting the words sink in, ensuring everyone was watching. "And to Clara's blog. May it one day have as many followers as I have customers in this room tonight." The table erupted in laughter. My father roared, clapping Mark on the back. My mother tittered behind her napkin. They saw it as a clever, harmless joke at the expense of the unserious little sister. But I felt it for what it was, a public execution. The laughter hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. In that moment, in front of a room full of strangers, I had been officially and permanently assigned my role, the punchline to my brother's success story. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks, a hot tide of humiliation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell them all the truth. I wanted to watch the arrogant, self-satisfied look on my brother's face crumble to dust. But I didn't. I remembered my mission. I was the oracle observing. So I did the last thing any of them expected. I lifted my own glass, met my brother's triumphant gaze across the table, and gave him a slow, unreadable smile. I would not give him the satisfaction of my tears. He had no idea that the judgment he had just passed on me was nothing compared to the one I was about to pass on him.